As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission, I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings. And I know that for certain, keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio. Today's guest host is Lauren Anderson.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
And just to start out, a shout out to Tom for letting me, as I was saying, guest gab this morning for some conversation about, reading, books, kids, creativity. Often we think about reading as a silent, solitary activity. It can be that. It can be wonderful in that way, but it can also be joyful, interactive, arts integrated, and really in the service, I think, of connecting us and young people to our own humanity and to the humanity of others. And it's often that kind of stuff that I think gets kids jazzed to read, most jazzed to read. And that's really at the root of what we're going to chat about this morning. I'm joined by two fantastic folks. I'm grateful that they're here with me to start the week off. We've got Dolores D. Williams, my dear friend, parent of two wonderful young readers. Co-founder of the community book space, People Get Ready, poetry lover, and my new friend, Isaac Bloodworth.
What's up?
Co-op grad, UConn grad, art handler, graphic designer, puppet master.
Not master, but I dabble in puppetry or got a degree.
Puppeteer and super exciting emerging kids book author.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
So just to kind of get us started, we'd love to just, hear a little bit more from each of you. And maybe Dee, you can kick us off just about yourself, sort of your experiences as a reader and some of what's on your mind now, kind of working to get your kids to love reading as much as you do.
Sure. I am a mom of two, as you said. One 10-year-old girl and a 7-year-old little boy who just happened to show me that he's interested in, playing with a puppet while, reading a story, which happened recently and made me really excited to meet you, actually. Because it just seemed like such a natural thing for him to do and gravitate towards. So it's like I'm learning from them so much every day. That's what I feel like with kids. I feel like, although I'm the parent and I'm in, control of to as much as I can be what they experience, I'm like contouring their experience and also like doing this dance of sort of exposing them to things and letting them go and learn from other people in the society that they're in. But I am learning so much from them. I feel like, I get so much back in that process.
The teacher becomes the student.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The good teacher always does.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. And I just like to sort of keep a teachable spirit in that way when it comes to my kids, because I feel like, just on a human level, I'm not the authority on everything. I feel like I'm, relearning life through them. And I was just saying that the other day when my daughter turned 10. I'm like, I also turned 10, because I became brand new as a mom, and so it's a journey of relearning myself. Definitely.
Do they love reading?
They do. I think that they naturally loved reading from the time I first introduced books to them, and just having books in their environment, they gravitated toward the pictures and the stories. I think pressure to read has changed things a little for them, but it has also made me more mindful of like the example that I set as a reader. Growing up, I was always surrounded by my parents reading, especially my dad reading like 3 or 4 books at a time, and always like making that the conversation when company came over and so forth. And they weren't, my parents were not in an environment where there was like a lot of technology interrupting that. Right. And so they may not share that opinion because I feel like Nintendo was big coming out and TV was emerging. The internet was emerging when I was coming up. But definitely, you know, we weren't walking around with phones on us.
This feels so good.
And so my kids are growing up with a dad who's a very, like, a techie person. He could be on a tablet watching, you know, whatever he's watching. He could be on his screen, you know, his computer. He could be watching the news, all of that going on at the same time. So because of the way that technology is shaping our environment so much now, I feel like having children has forced me to like go in the opposite direction where I don't watch TV. And like I'm always reading, trying to like, because I don't think that children respond to what you tell them to do. They really respond to what they see you doing.
And loving to do.
Yeah. So I'm like trying to maintain the balance there. So yeah, I mean, it's like just a constant struggle of like making sure that, you know, technology is adding value and not taking away.
What about you, Isaac? What's your relationship to reading?
Oh, so very complicated. No, so I had the same thing. So my dad always took me down to like the public library down here. We would have days where we would go to the comic book store and read comics. So that's like where I fall in love with reading is comics and like graphic novels and manga. And then when my mom was going through medical school, when she was studying and stuff like that, she would take me to Barnes and Nobles for hours and hours on end. So I would like read there. Even after a while though, she was like, you can't keep reading the same comic books over and over again. But like I was reading because she wanted me to get into like bigger, thicker books, and I was like, nah, comics. So yeah, but after a while, like when reading became like an objective or like something that was more institutionalized, I didn't really care to do it anymore. It just took the fun out of it. That's also why I realized I don't like Shakespeare. It's not because he's like a horrible guy or anything, but like the way they taught it was as reading and not as a play.
Yeah.
And so like now like the stuff wasn't brought to life the way it should have been when I was in 7th grade. And so yeah, so I was like, Shakespeare, like who cares? Like we're just reading old language rather than like playing with it. I also went to Amistad. I don't know if that affects that too.
Does it? Do you have more to say about that?
We'll talk about that another
That was
time.
loaded. I just I feel the energy.
So yeah, so I would say reading kind of got sucked out from like all that because in school like it was this thing that had to happen versus like this like learn to love it and like find your section and all these different things. I still stuck with comic books because one thing I would do when I lived on Whaley for a very long time in Westville, when I would lock myself out the house, I would go to the library. That'd be the first place I go. And,
oh,
hang
how
out with
smart!
The
If only I had the same thought as a kid.
I was like, it's warm. I got to know the librarians. Sometimes they have food.
Oh, good for you.
Know. And so I would like sit there and read for hours until like my parents came home. So that was something I would do. And then speaking of technology, as technology grew, that's when like reading became different. So I remember when my dad got like the first comic book app and like there was like comic books all and like from all the universities or whatever. And so you can like read it on the computer in your tablet.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
I would like be like, Dad, like $4.99, just this book. I just need this one to complete the series and I'll be reading, I'll be done. And then I also remember when I found my like love for literature again, like in books itself, it would be like in certain like science fiction series. So like Maximum Ride was a big one growing up. So James Patterson was pretty big for me. So Maximum Ride, and he had another book called The Midnighters that was pretty awesome. Where like these kids had like this extra 25th hour in the day in Arizona specifically, and they had to like save the world, and it was like really dope. And I remember at one point it was really bad. I was reading through all the books. I couldn't find it in the library. I was like, Mom, I need you to buy this book. She's like, well, did you do your homework? I was like, you're gonna hold me accountable this one time I want to actually read? And she's like, well, did you do your homework? I was like, no. She's like, well, I'm not buying the book. I was like, are you kidding me? So that was a little funny thing. But like now I find myself buying books on my phone. And what's really cool with my girlfriend is that I actually read to her and she reads to me. So like we just started reading The Water Dancer by Tanasi.
Oh,
Coates.
nice.
Yeah. So that was something we actually did in Portugal, starting to read together. And
Reading to each other is really like a special thing to
very
do.
intimate.
Yeah.
It is.
I love it.
Yeah,
It is.
I tried with Good Omens first because while she was still in London, and I got the wrong book, so I didn't get the Good Omens book. I got the script book, and so like then I had to like act through the book, and it was like a little weird. I didn't make it through the whole book because there's like 5 characters all at once, a lot of different British voices to remember or accents. But yeah, that's where kind of my love of reading is. It's like pictures and like manga and graphic novels. So, yeah.
It's kind of amazing too. I mean, I know just from prior conversation with you, Isaac, like we've talked a little bit about some of the ways that school in particular, I think, can discourage kids from reading and really turn them off from it by focusing, I would say, on sort of the wrong things like quantity. I mean, you've even talked about having experiences where like reading was almost like a punishment, like something that you were sent to do.
Yeah, no, most definitely. There's been times I love my parents, but like taking away the TV and making me read for a punishment was not necessarily probably the best idea. We live and we learn.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the other thing to be mindful is like, how do we treat reading? Is it like something that's for fun and levity, or is it something that like you need to do because you've had too much TV time or like too much other non-constructive time? And like, how do you think about that?
I'm seeing D with a deep nod.
But no, that's why it's cool that I also have it on my phone now, so I can read like at night and like all types of like whenever, wherever, and stuff like that. So Maze Runner was another good series I had chomped through. It was really good.
I mean, this part about pictures too and drawing and arts. I mean, so one of the things I often think is really unfair is how for books for adults, they've like stolen all the pictures out of them for us.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
as if we wouldn't have love.
Yeah.
You know, I often like suggest to people of all ages that they read children's books.
Yeah.
Or what we think of as children's books. I mean, many of which are obviously written by adults and written with the thoughts of adults reading with children in mind. And they're beautiful and they like engage your senses in all these different ways. I don't know. I think it's really a shame and like a missed opportunity in a way.
Well, here's 2 things. So there are some books that have like pictures in them for adults. There's one like that was a Japanese book that I was reading, or it had Japanese characters, and they would like put like small little comics throughout or whatever, but the most of it was just words. And then misquoting the book, but I think it's like the Miss Peregrine's Peculiar Children, and that one was really cool because it went this whole nother universe where these kids had special powers and they're stuck in World War II. But like throughout the book, they had like pictures of what the kids look like through photography and stuff like that. They are Photoshop. And so it still had the picture element, but it was still, I guess, adult. Second thing, for whatever reason, and I talked to this about to Lucy Gelman, is that as a society, we all agreed that being an adult is miserable and that we're all going to continue down this wrong path of being an adult, what an adult means.
Yeah.
And we all agreed that like we're just going to be miserable together rather than like saying like, hey, how about we all not be miserable together? But everybody's like, nah, that's just gushy kid stuff. And it's like, no, we're adults. We make the rules. It's like the really fun thing I read online is like millennials who are growing up, such as myself. And they're like, oh, we're adults now. We can actually eat ice cream if we want to. Like, there's nobody telling us
For breakfast.
not. Yeah,
My
for
kids
breakfast.
can't wait for that, by the way.
But yeah, for some reason, we all decided that adult life has to be boring, full of struggle, and full of heartache and horridness and non-communication. Yeah.
And we're trying to be about joy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which I know is also like a theme, right? In some of the work you've been doing. So you want to talk about your character, Joy, that features in some of your work?
Most definitely. So I'm building this whole universe for Black kids where like they don't have to worry about police brutality or racism. And it's called Adventures of Joy, the Black Boy. And so I've had this character come through multiple times in different things. The first one was my senior thesis where I did a puppet show about children and police brutality, and pretty much
And this was at UConn?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and so he's pretty much chasing these butterflies, and before he goes out into the real world, his parents like give him the black talk about like being
Yeah.
careful and like minding your space as a black person in the world. And then he meets a police officer who uses his gives him an ice cream cone and like use that as a moment to put him on the Blue Lives Matter page, because we've also fallen into the trap to be like, oh, police officers are nice to the black kids, so everything's all good and systemic racism is solved. And it was like, nah, like you haven't held the other officer accountable who does do horrible stuff to black kids. Um, and then so there's that moment. He goes into the store, gets Arizona iced tea, and as he's following this butterfly, he gets watched in the store, even though he's a paying customer. And then he sees like a black gentleman on the corner hustling and stuff like that. And so in that moment, he gets like all these ideas of like playing cops and robbers with the butterfly. And then the butterfly takes him to a park where he's like, he loses the butterfly eventually, but he sits in the park, and now he's eating his Arizona and Skittles, and then like a police officer comes up and shoots him. And so what happens is I don't show him actually getting shot, but what I do instead is project the video to Tamir Rice getting shot, so that people can kind of see the connection that like it's not just a children's story, it's like real life. And then I have Nina Simone playing underneath Strange Fruit. And so when she says like Strange Fruit drops, that's when Tamir Rice gets shot. And so yeah, so the children's stuff that I do is kind of like a loaded missile. So like when adults see it, they're like, oh, it's just cutesy. And then like when they actually
It's
get
for
to
adults too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't show the shooting to the kids, but I would show them like the illustration part. And I did that with a second puppet piece that I had called Curled, but this one wasn't as graphic. It was more about black girls learning to love their hair, even in a society that doesn't. It's like the grandmother tells this black girl about like her ancestors and this goddess that came down and like had locks and like learned to love her locks. And at the end of the story, there's a video clip of the black boy getting his locks cut at the wrestling match earlier this year. And then there's like news clippings about like all the black kids who like had trouble this year going to school with their locks and their hair. And then Solange's Don't Touch My Hair is playing underneath. And then at the end there's I forget her name, but it's like Jaden. And she's like this new popular little black girl on Instagram, and she's like, I'm gorgeous. I love myself. I'm gorgeous. And so like that's kind of like the happy ending to the whole story, is that there are black kids who are learning to love themselves. But yeah, I forgot what the question was. But yeah, that's kind of where joy comes from, is like that the crinky puppet style that I started. And so then I wanted to bring joy back to life and make them into this whole childlike brand that's against racism, but through happiness, cotton candy, and things of that nature, which I know does not solve institutional racism, but it can expand the story of what black people are able to do. And it's not just slavery and the miserable things that and the trauma that we have to constantly go through to tell stories, but we also have the future and positive things and good things for kids to look to.
This idea that people are more than their struggles.
Yeah
Yeah.
I mean, we definitely need to talk about the trauma, because white people still don't understand about the institutional racism, but the trauma shouldn't be drudged up by black people. The work should be done by white people. So
I think it's helpful to have some sort of a tool to start this sort of conversation with your children, because my kids are just young enough that they really don't know about Tamir Rice or Trayvon. I really haven't like had that conversation yet.
So there's this puppet, well, there's not I wouldn't say puppet, and I'm probably misquoting the name. I believe it's We the People. There's this black mom, and she has a friend as well, and they go around to like libraries and teach kids about institutional racism, do like puppet shows and like other different things. And it's in Brooklyn, Massachusetts, and I was like working with them in the Puppet Show Place Theater to help develop a new show that they're doing. But it's along that lines, and we should bring them down here.
Yeah,
That's a great idea.
Because they found a way to talk about racism to kids without being like lynchings and all that, but saying like this is kind of the issue, and they kind of get it. So some of the parents learn too while they're watching their kids.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think the history of like developmentally appropriate practice in education is really complicated, and it's often been wielded like as a way to avoid having conversations, like a way for white folks to not talk about the things that really need, especially on their part, to be talked about and processed and figured out. So that sounds amazing. We should get them down to People Get Ready or the public library. Shout out to our friends at the libraries across the city.
Yeah.
So I have like some questions about form, Isaac. So like I know you're working. I mean, you mentioned Crankies. You also, it sounds like you're doing things that are like really related to graphic design, but then you're also like using music and this really multimedia and multisensory stuff, like experiential stuff that you're building for folks. So how are you going from that to like writing a children's book?
Well,
like how do you kind of can you talk a little bit about that? Just your process?
The crankies themselves are it's 2 rods, and so what happens is I put illustration or I block illustration for like the window of the cranky itself, which is like a box. And as I'm telling the story, I'm cranking the images through. And so at some point I was like, oh, this is just a really huge children's book. And I was like, why not just compress it into a children's book? So there's that. But then the alphabet book that I want to start with, what inspired that is I was interning at the Yale Art Gallery. And there's this Black gentleman in Brantford who used to be a police officer, and he's also part of the one of the Black fraternities, Omega Psi Phi. And so we were doing this collab exhibition with UNH that it kind of fell apart, but he has like this massive amount of like Black racial paraphernalia to the point where he has like a Tuskegee Airman suit. He also has a KKK like outfit that he like conned off this white dude. And then he also has like chains and like other things and minstrel show awards and like whatever was collected from 1900s and earlier. Wow. And then like there's like a on his bar he has like a shopping list that's like cow, lettuce, Black person, and then like it's crazy. But one of the things that he had in his collection was a children's book that was like Alphabet Book of the Negro or something like that, and it had like Black kids like being put in like precarious racial situations or whatever to talk about the alphabet. I guess it was fun for little white kids to read or something like that. So I was like, why not make one that is helpful to Black kids in their imagery and self-esteem and self-worth, and not one that takes them down. So yeah.
Where are you in that process?
So just started. Well, the good part is I know the alphabet. So it's 26
knowing is half the battle.
Yes.
So it's 26 images that I have to produce. But I got part of the other idea I got from my illustration class I took in college, where like we did three words that describe like the letter and the thing going on in the letter. And then I'm gonna do that for each letter, whatever. And then Joy's gonna be like doing something different for each letter.
So
like,
Joy's in the alphabet book.
Yeah. He's in the whole alphabet book. So like the first one will be like ascending Afro-American astronaut. And so he's like an astronaut. And so
Nice. We can't wait.
I can't wait either.
So when do you do this work? Kind of in the time around?
Whenever I get free time. Yeah. I'm always doing something.
Art making, it's hard.
Yeah. If I'm not doing that, then I'm with Broken Umbrella doing shows with them because they have a show coming up about Walter Camp, or doing improv like this Wednesday night, or I just got commissioned to do like a painting, and then I finished a mural for Citywide Youth Coalition that's gonna be unveiled later this winter. So there's always something going on. I don't know. It's whatever people call me to do that week, or doing an interview, because I call it an interview.
Here you are.
So each day or week is different, I guess.
Do you feel like you were the exact same spiritually as a child as you are now? Have you preserved yourself?
So my girlfriend always talks about how she sees the inner child in me.
Yeah.
And then I went to Tama recently to do like a reading, and like I actually want to get back to even more inner child Isaac that I've lost through like getting churned out from Amistad and other institutional
spaces.
People. Because it does churn you out to like be the same like everybody else. As much as I love my UConn program, sometimes the creativity was like a little like, well, you just gotta do this project and like get it done with and stuff like that. They don't really and I feel like in art school they kind of lose the fact of like you came to do art, even though you're learning techniques and things like that. They still kind of like they grind you out a little bit rather than like still fostering that sense of differentness that you're bringing to the program or why they brought you in. So
do you feel like your parents have been instrumental in like helping you maintain a sense of yourself, or like what is the thing that helps you to stay hold on?
Do you want tips?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think this is like getting to the heart of it,
Yeah, no,
right?
Yeah.
Like
no,
keeping
keep
the
asking the
inner child
questions.
alive and in
That's
a way.
my mission as a mother.
Where you don't have to reignite it later in life or
Yeah, like
unlearn
Pablo
the
Picasso.
layers
Or go
that
through
you
too
put
much
on top of
trauma.
it.
Yeah,
To-
like Pablo Picasso, that was his
Mhm.
greatest thing. It was like he was like, "Oh my God, I can paint wonderfully." And at some point, he was like, "I want to just paint like a child again,"
Mhm.
and he like lost that. But to your question, so me and my parents have a wonderful, lovely learning relationship. We're now in this phase of learning who I am as an adult. But I would say no, they still fostered a lot of child friendly inner spirit inside me. Like going to museums, going to plays,
Great.
watching movies. Like one thing that me and my dad do is like going to
Right.
see the superhero movies. Like that's our thing. It's like
Aw.
we'll see it the night before or something like that. Yeah, no, they're always fostering that inside me. I mean,
Nice.
for a little bit they were scared because I think they wanted me to be an adult. I don't know what that means still. Because I remember I was like, "Hey, I want you to spend 40 grand for 4 years playing with puppets," and my mom was like, did not immigrate all the way to this country."
Oh, where's she from?
She's from Jamaica.
Oh, okay.
Dad's like, "I didn't come through poverty just for you to be out here playing with puppets in our basement after you leave." Which I'm not doing. I'm in another basement, working. At the,
Handling art. Yeah.
At the British Art Center, is taking care of the. Well, I'm not handling art this time,
No.
but I'm taking care of the building. I'm
Nice.
doing building maintenance. But yeah, no. So at first they were worried, but then after a while, they like kind of saw my path, or
Yeah.
maybe they don't see my path, but they just trust me that I'm gonna be doing something.
Because you're serious about it and
Yeah.
it shows.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that children come into the world with their brilliance,
Mhm.
right? And then we kind of sort of undo it, like
Yeah.
you said, in certain spaces. It kind
Mhm.
of gets a little undone.
Yeah, because you want them.
Or covered over.
Mhm.
Like quashed.
I think
Yeah.
one thing we forget is that kids are humans, who come with a lot of intellect and brilliance, like you just said.
Yeah.
They're always learning. They're always watching. I think we forget that they're not dumb. They're not like these. I mean, they're a sponge to an extent, but they're also like, I guess, a megaphone because like they're also repeating back
Mhm.
what they've
They have
learned.
opinions. They have
Exactly.
feelings.
Exactly. We forget all these things that make us an adult is to not have feelings or have. Here's the thing. Also, people feel like opinions can't be incorrect, and they can. You can be misinformed.
Yeah, you need to stay humble because you could be dead wrong.
Yeah, you can be dead wrong, and
Yeah.
people forget that. I think that's why we're having a lot of trouble in this political climate. Is that everybody's like, "Well, it's my opinion," and it's like, "Yeah, but like everybody already agreed
You need
that
to check that.
Yeah, everybody agreed that the sky is blue, and you're the only person who's still saying the sky is green." So yeah, no, like validating their opinions, validating their feelings, helping them understand their opinions and feelings and stuff like that,
Yeah.
I think will help keep that inner child in them.
So what does that look like to the two of you when it comes to like reading with kids or experiences around books? I mean, I know books are like a common thing we all care a lot about, but also are often things that kids resist because of the way they're asked to engage with them.
Mhm.
I mean, just it's funny. Like this makes me think of an experience I had as a teacher. We did this really wonderful thing called descriptive review of a child. I don't know if
Mhm.
you've ever heard of it, but it's like a really focused way of looking at one child as a learner,
Mhm.
where you kind of step back as the teacher and you observe like all kinds of things, their preferences, their like the ways that they go about the learning process, things they say, their gestures. And I'll never forget I had the chance to like do this in my classroom when a storyteller came to visit, and I had chosen this child to focus on for this descriptive review process. And we were supposed to pick somebody who we like struggled to connect with. And this was a kid who had like a hard time sometimes focusing, or so I thought.
Mhm.
Right? It's like the education of the teacher. So I'm watching, and you know, they're on the rug with this storyteller who's kind of like doing this really dramatic reading of a book. And this kid, I notice sitting there, and suddenly I'm like, how does he have like something from the math center? You know, he's got this like manipulative, somehow he's picked it up. And he is running that thing through the rug like a choo-choo train. It's going up his arm, like flying through the air. And I'm thinking, look at, he's so distracted.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah, but here's the thing that was so, and here's the thing that was so amazing about it. there were parts of the story that were actually interactive where the audience was supposed to join in. And I watched this distracted child join in seamlessly
Mm-hmm.
with the story.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing that I had the like misunderstanding of as distraction was actually part of the way that, through movement, through play, part of the way that like this kid was actually connecting to the book, to the story, to the experience. And I feel like so much of that was like really insightful for me. And just being able to see one child that way, you start to realize how much you miss and also misread as a teacher, maybe as a parent, even when it comes to your own like kids, and how we can figure out what their brilliance is and tap into that to make reading like more joyful.
Yeah, I think that's can be one of the mistakes that we make as people who see ourselves in positions of authority over children.
Mm-hmm.
Is them having to prove themselves, which essentially is like them proving their worthiness, which is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to prove your worthiness. You are enough just as you are.
Mm-hmm.
There's a beautiful new book for children called You Are Enough. I don't know if either of you
No.
know. That was the setup. You can come to People Get Ready if you're looking for that one.
Definitely down to read that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book.
But I definitely agree with you guys because I was an honor roll student in middle school, but like I was also on every report card talking about how I was distracted because I'd be drawing in class. But I'm still the honor roll student.
That's my son.
But it's such a good example though, because it's a gateway to literacy.
Yeah.
It's like how you build stories through visual imagery. I mean, drawing is like at the basis of storytelling.
Yeah, we gotta kind of reevaluate like what standards we're holding for children. Because like you said last night when we were on the phone, it's like I'm sitting in this class with like these kids and like they're expecting them to listen and I don't even want to listen. So it's just like
Oh yeah, I was saying I visit teachers a lot, and I kind of have to remind them like, this is hard for me. These 20 minutes of like sitting in a rug and just trying to corral a child's body into a rug square,
Right.
and how I don't know how problematic that is.
Unfair.
Unfair, and this idea of like kind of just bending kids to these parameters that are really, really artificial and unhealthy, and about compliance, really more than they're about learning even, but also certainly about joy and expression and creativity.
Yeah. And then, so that happens at school, right? And then they get it at home because they weren't behaving at school. And then you get more punishment. And it's just like so diminishing of their like interest in learning. Like,
And wasn't it your son, Mason, who kind of like brought the puppet out, like kind of organically one night?
Absolutely. And actually reminded me reminded me of just like my experience as a kid. When I was little, my mom, who's very creative, used to create like puppet stages for me downstairs. Like she would save boxes, she would take old curtains, she would like make set scenes for me, and those are like my vivid memories of childhood, and so I just think it's so important. Mason just did that randomly. I had never done it to him that I can recall. He just.
And was this like reading a story? Can you set the stage for us?
So we were reading a story because we have to fulfill a requirement at school of reading a certain amount of books per week, right? And so I was like, he was getting reading logs, and they were kind of like, I mean, I didn't really like the way that they were set up, and actually the teacher has since adjusted them so that they're a little bit like easier or more attractive, even just to the eye. But yeah, I mean, the kids are required to do like at least 30 minutes of reading per night, which is good, and I agree with that. But we're also tasked with having to like answer these specific questions about the reading, and so. Sometimes, like, if your child doesn't answer the specific questions, then it becomes like, you have to do it this way. And so to me, it's important to have some flexibility around those things, because I don't want to take the joy away from reading. And I don't want it to feel like a punishment. It feels like a punishment for me if I have to make reading a punishment. And I really like to read. So I was like, what is going on here? So anyway.
I think homework feels like that to a lot of parents,
Exactly.
actually, as like an
It's
intrusion.
like homework to me,
And-
you know?
Yeah.
And
It is. It's intrusive into your
Yeah.
daily living. But so we were going through this book and I was telling him, Mason, all right, now tell me what happened in the story, following this line of questioning. And so he just popped out the puppet. And I think for him, what was happening was that pulling this character out and having the character answering my questions took the pressure off of him having to answer.
Sure, right.
It was like, all right, Mom, if you're taking this out on somebody, it's not going to be me. You're going to have to deal with this puppet.
With the little dino man.
Yeah. And it just was like an organic way of him,
Mm-hmm.
the way that his creativity came out of him. And I was like, okay, like we can roll with this,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So
I know, and it's like that's the kind of thing kids are doing all the time, and you could easily respond and be like, "Stop being so silly."
Yeah.
Like, we need to get to work,
Yeah.
right.
and miss the fact that that is the work,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and that also is the way of like keeping the joy
Yeah.
at the center.
Mm-hmm.
And
of
my
the work.
son is very like he won't let go of it. Like
He's
will-
chasing butterflies.
Yeah,
to-
he'll
I did it in the
I don't
baseball
have a
field.
choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
he's gonna be himself. Like he'll say to me, "Mommy, be patient," or like, "Just let me be. You
Mhm.
worry about yourself, Mom. Just let me be. I know what to do."
Are you
Like,
hearing yourself,
Mhm,
Isaac?
mhm. Yeah, no. Except for my mom probably yell back and be like, "What you mean worry about myself? You are myself."
My son
You're
is
in,
going.
you're in second grade.
I know, right? But
Yeah.
he's gone deeper than that. Like, if I'm correcting him, he's actually said to me, like, laughed and said, "You're my parent now, but I used to be your parent." Like, wait a second, what am I supposed to do with this child?
Oh man.
So I just say that to say I think that children carry wisdom.
Oh, most
and-
definitely. They see
Yeah.
things that you may not see because, like, again, we have the adult blinders on, so we're like, "This is what life is, and this is how it's supposed to be seen." And then, like, they come along, and it's like, "No, that's not. We can move that over there, or put that over there." And you're like,
Yeah.
"No, that doesn't work." And then, like, after a while, you're like, "Oh, that does work." Like, how do I come back to the child and say, like, "Oh, like you're right." That's the other thing is like apologizing to children.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and showing children that you can be wrong.
Sincerely.
Yeah.
Sincerely apologizing
Yeah.
too. Not the
Yeah.
like cheesy kind of apology that they can see right
Yeah.
through.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Apologizing and just
Mhm.
admitting when you're wrong, or
Mhm.
admitting, like you said before, that you don't know everything.
No, you don't.
So nobody knows everything. If we did, we wouldn't be here.
Yeah, no, that was another one of those lessons that I learned from that experience that I mentioned about that child, really having to figure out like, how do I actually let him know, like, I did not see you fully before
Yeah.
today, and I'm really, really sorry about that, and
Yeah.
I am going to do better
Here's
for
the-
you and for for everybody else. Like, also, you helped me see something I
Mhm.
couldn't see before,
Mhm.
and those are hard moments.
Yeah.
They are.
Because we often don't like learn how to really apologize sincerely to children
Yeah.
as if they
Because we
are.
don't see their worth.
Yeah, we don't.
But here's the other layer, because even as teachers, and these
Mhm.
are things that I'm learning as I'm looking at, again, at institutional racism and poverty and like how all these things affect, is that kids come in with their own life also.
Yeah.
And so like as like a adult authority that's dealing with children, whether it's a teacher or not, is that like that kid may be hungry and you don't know that. And that's why that kid's distracted, or like
Yeah.
that kid may have been dealing with a parent who has cancer and you didn't realize that. And
Right.
like, but they don't say cancer. They were like, "Oh, mommy's just really sick." Or like just these different aspects of life that's also happening to them. I say this again, I really hate this phrase of like, "Oh, when you're an adult, you'll enter the real world." And it's like, no, you've always been in the real world, but some people's lives are better than others. And some people have to deal with the hard life parts up front all the time. So like, we just have to realize that kids are also going through these same things as well.
Yeah.
So, any last thoughts from the two of you about this kind of idea of like just cultivating joy
Go do
in
something
our
that
littles?
your
And
inner
I think
child would do today.
And I think also,
Yeah.
especially maybe for boys, I mean, who are really like we've kind of ended up talking about, just Isaac, like from your experience, and Dee, related to Mason, just how to kind of support them to kind of stay true to the things that they love and care about, maybe not the messaging that they get about what it means to be, to be a little man.
Yeah.
I think it's just important to like check in with your children and listen to young people just as much as it is to talk to them about your opinions and beliefs. It's important to hear back from them, how they're filtering things and how they're understanding things and relating to things in the world. And I think it's important to encourage them to make well-being, their priority, and not to hold themselves apart from the well-being that should be there for them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say.
I would say one, like I said before, do something that your inner child would want to do today. Like if that means get ice cream for lunch, go do that. But also at the same time, there was something funny that I read and it was saying like if you're over a certain age and you don't have a mentor of a younger age, then you're not really ever still learning.
Really,
like so at some
so
point,
wise.
Yeah, I didn't come up with it, but like I was like, that's dope. It's like if you're 40, you should probably have a mentor who's like 16 or 20 something, because they come in with technology that you may not know about, or just phrases, or like full of life things. That you have forgotten about or chose to turn yourself off from. So yeah,
I love that idea. Sort of like mentors across the lifespan.
Yeah,
joy mentors too. Oh well, thanks for joining. When can we expect this book, Isaac?
Oh, so now we're gonna put pressure on me.
No pressure. But how about this? You have an open invitation.
Yeah,
to,
sometime next year, probably April.
Ready.
Yeah, probably around April. Because I have a Black artist workshop that I'm hosting for adults on January 4th. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Great.
You want to say a little bit more about that? What?
Oh, nah. So it's still in the works.
Okay.
But it's
cool.
going to be like this blackity black artist workshop where like all these different artists or of adults like pay a little fee to come in, and then we talk about what it means to be a Black artist in this day and age. Hopefully, like talk about some healing factors, our relationship with art and being Black, and not necessarily having to create political Black art all the time, and kind of freeing ourselves of that trauma sometimes, even though it's hard. And then networking between one another so that we can build a better community of Black artists.
Fantastic.
Wonderful.
Is it going to be here in New Haven?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of studios. Yeah, it's called Black Period with T.
Love it.
So
you heard it here first. Thanks again to Tom Ficklin for letting us crash this morning. Happy Monday, everybody. We out.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions.